Hello, greetings, Lick Trinidad. My name is Andrea Cristabel Vasquez Rivas, and I will talk about a little bit of the biography of Richard Wright. The work of Richard was focused with references to racial themes, especially those dealing with the plight of African Americans in the late 19th century and the first half of the 20th. The childhood of this author was not easy. Why? Because when he was still a child, his father abandoned him and his mother and brother. Also, his mother was always sick, and that's why he lived with different people. He lived in orphanage, and also with uncles after that. But with his uncles, Richard had a lot of problems because his uncles were too religious. The life in these places were very particular and special of this author. First of all, we are going to talk about the life in Chicago of Richard. He and his family left home to live in Chicago, where he began to do what he was most passionate about, writing. Although at first it was very difficult. He got a job as a postal clerk and in his spare time read other writers and study his styles. In 1931, losing his job during the Great Depression, and he was forced to turn to charity. He also began to get very involved in Communist Party movements, and it was there that he wrote a lot of poems related to that, and then he wrote some well-received novels, including Big Boy Leaves Home in January 1936. But because of his collaboration with movements, communists had a lot of problems with white people discriminating against him, and also with people of color who thought he shared the same ideas as white people, and they supposed that he was very similar to them. Now the life of this author were very different in New York because he had a lot of problems in Chicago. He emigrated to New York, where he was very successful in his writing. He became the editor of the Daily Worker in Harlem, and he wrote more highly successful novels in which the reality of people of color was reflected, and the reality that himself had lived, which was recounted in the work Black Boy in 1945, which is semi-autobiography. He describes his life in Roxy until his move to Chicago, his clashes with his Adventist family, his difficulties with white employers, and his social isolation. Unfortunately, due to the fact that since 1943 he was investigated by the FBI due to his contribution to the Communist parties and also due to the racial reality lived in the United States. So that's why he emigrated to Paris, France. Although this did not stop him from continuing to write his novels, essays, and writings. Among these, the also died of 1953, Black Power of 1954, and also White Men Listen of 1957, among others. In May 1959, Wright wanted to leave Paris to live in London. He felt that French police were increasingly submissive to American pressure. The Parisian tranquility he had enjoyed was shared by scuffles and attacks instigated by enemies of expatriate black writers. Now we are going to talk about the family life, and in 1941 he married Ellen Popper, the daughter of Polish immigrants of Jewish descent and a communist party organizer in Brooklyn. They had two daughters, Julia in 1942 and Rachel in 1949. The death of this actor, well, and Wright contracted a morbid dysentery on a visit to Africa in 1957, and despite various treatments, his health deteriorated over the next 3 years. He died in Paris of a heart attack at the age of 52. He was buried in the Père Lachaise cemetery. However, his daughter Julia claimed that his father was murdered. And this is a little bit of the life of Richard Nathaniel Wright. Thank you so much.
I'm group number 5, and I'm going to talk about the book Black Boy by Richard Wright. And I'm going to talk about the setting. So to start giving a bit of context, let me tell you how the story begins. And this starts or begins when 4-year-old Richard sets fire to his grandmother's house in Jackson, Mississippi, because he was bored and he didn't know what to do to occupy himself. So he set fire to a few straws pulled from a broom, and he then places the flame near to the room's windows curtain, not realizing it will cause them to blaze suddenly. So as punishment, he was nearly beaten to death by his mother. However, he eventually recovers, and the brutal punishment establishes in Richard like an ability to survive to any circumstance. So then the family moves from Jackson, Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee, where Richard's father eventually deserts the family. So in Memphis, Richard learns about racism, both from what he observes in the world and how his family members humiliate themselves in front of whites. And then Richard, the narrator, then recounts a number of different memories and sensory experiences from his childhood in no particular order. So these included the beauty of the natural world around Natchez in Mississippi, which was the town of his birth and earliest years, and the plants and animals he sees and the sky in the evening. Then Richard as well recounts his first move with his family to Memphis, where his parents were or have presumably gone to find work. Then where they moved in Memphis, the family lived in a small decrepit tenement in Memphis, and his father works as an overnight security guard at a drugstore. Then as well, we can say that Richard spends most of his time hopping from one place to another because his family can never make rent. They are always moving to a smaller, dirtier home, and at one point they are living in one half of a double corner house, in front of which ran a stagnant ditch carrying sewage. So in general, all of this moving makes Richard's home and the setting in general as well totally unstable, because there was never a particular place that feels like a home except wherever his mother is. And at the same time, Richard is terrorized by the everyday violence of the South, and especially by the increase of violence during the race riots. So we can conclude that there was no home, no security, and no wonder he wants out. So this was all for me by the city, and my partner will continue with the next topic. Thank you.
Black Boy is Richard Wright's autobiography about his childhood in the South and his life as a young adult in Chicago. He talks about his suffering as a child, including starvation, beatings, about racism treatment. As an adult, he tried as failed to escape racism by heading north. He hopes that communities will offer him a path to salvation, but that also disappoints him. The gender of Richard Wright, Black Boy, is a long-standing controversy due to ambiguity. Black Boy follows Wright's childhood with a degree of accuracy that suggests it exists as an autobiography. Although Wright never claimed or denied whether the book was entirely autobiographical or fictional. None of Wright's other books follow the truth of his life as The Black Boy does. The book's apparent tendency to blend fact and fiction is criticized due to a specific dialogue that suggests a degree of fiction. Additionally, Wright omits certain details of his family's background that would normally be included in an autobiographical novel. While Wright may have stayed from historical truth, the book is accurate in the sense that the directness and ruggedness of his writing really straight from true in narrative. Black Boy's style is highly regarded to the outspokenness that defined social demand at the time of Black Boy's release. Wright denies the race-based oppression he endured taught his ability to read and write eloquently and credibly, as well as his courage to speak out against the dominant norms of society that are holding him back. Richard Wright's Black Boy was written in 1943 and published 2 years later. In the early years of his career, Wright wrote Black Boy as a response to the experiences he had growing up. Since Black Boy is partly autobiographical, many of the anecdotes come from actual experience during Wright's childhood. Richard Wright's family spent much of his time in deep poverty, enduring hunger and disease, moving across the country in search of a better life. Wright sees his childhood and family background as the main influence of his greeting specifically the religious presence of Wright's family throughout his childhood had a strong influence on both his religious outlook and his greeting. Similarly, Wright's experiences growing up poor and enduring hunger causes considerable angst that the Republic reference in Black Book. Overall, Wright attributes his black boy influences to the racial inequalities he maintained throughout his travel across America. Wright learned the power of reading and writing as a means toward new ways of looking and seeing at a young age. When he was 17, he left Jackson to find work in Memphis, where he became heavily involved in literary groups and publication and expanded his use of word as a weapon to count, to march, to fight, to create a sense of hunger to the life that at use, which is seen in Black Boy. Wright stated that the choose to write about the experiences referring in a black boy in an effort to look differently at his life, to build a bridge of word between himself and the world.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Mejia. I am going to talk about themes. Themes are the fundamental and often universal ideas explored in our literary work. The insidious effect of racism. Racism has a problem among individuals. It's a familiar topic in literature. Black Boy, however, explored racism not only as an audience believed held by audience people, but also as an insidious problem knit into the very fabric of society as a whole. The individual versus society. Richard is firstly individual and constantly expresses a desire to join society on his own terms rather than be forced into one of the categories that society wishes him to find. In this regard, Richard strongly against a dominant white culture, both in the South and in the North, and even against his own black culture. The redemptive power of art. When a school teacher furtively whispered to Richard the plot of Rupert in his 7th week, Richard becomes transfixed. He says that the history evoked his first total emotional response.
As we know, most things are requiring structures, contracts, and literary devices that can help to develop and inform the text major themes. We can find some of them where you can appreciate the information that we have taken from the book